What is up, ladies and gentlemen of the online Jamily, JamiroFan 2000, here with yet another episode of JamiroFan Talks About. For the initiated of the series here on the JamiroFan 2000 YouTube channel, nearly 9 years, this has been my periodic discussion series looking at the past, present, and future of Jamiroquai, and they're now over 32 years in musical and influential making, and this is going to be a special episode of JamiroFan Talks About. It's going to be a two-tier episode. It's going to be discussing my latest Jamiditorial release, my 13th consecutive release in this long-standing project of nearly a year and a half out of the blistering amount of projects I've been doing of a Jamiroquai since over the last year and a half. Looking back at my stories of the Automaton album era from between the years of 2016 through 2020, and boy, do I have some stories to tell. But I released that large, expansive 15-page article of that Jamiditorial on all my social media today. And then the second half of this episode, JamiroFan Talks About, I'm going to be talking about three great high-profile music releases, one of which has a direct connection with a band member of Jamiroquai that just came out here in the first week of 2025, and I thought I'd get my thoughts on all three of those albums. So let's get into this episode of JamiroFan Talks About. First off, for this episode of JamiroFan Talks About, I thought I'd discuss my 13th consecutive Jamitorial release that I've released on my social media, on my Instagram, and of course over on IMGUR. Now, for anybody who needs a little bit of context on this project, I've been self-publishing and releasing a plethora of resource and information guides over the last, I want to say, year and a half, as I prefaced the beginning of this episode of JamiroFan Talks About. And it just so happens that my most recent project, Jamiditorials, which is, of course, my play on the word jam and editorial, are a series of op-eds, around 13 of them I've written so far, on various topics of hot-button discussion topics of the Jamily over the last 30 years of their history. Well, this new project is a collection of my personal stories from my time covering the Automaton album era for Jamiroquai, which, of course, happened between the years of 2016 through 2020. Well, this is just a collection of some of my short stories, and it's a 6-chapter Jamiditorial release, as I've talked many videos here on the JamiroFan 2000 YouTube channel, some of my select stories from that album era, and boy, was it exciting times in that story. But like I said, it took me a good while to write this article, nearly 5 to 6 weeks, but I just released it on my Instagram and, of course, on IMGUR. So if you'd like to check out this great collection of stories from my time in the Automaton era of Jamiroquai's 8th album era, I'll be sure to put links to that Jamiditorial, the first two parts of it, pages 1 through 6, and, of course, 7 through 15. That is on my respective Instagram account. And, of course, if you want the whole kit and caboodle in one easily digest IMGUR album, I took the liberty of putting that whole 15-page article up on IMGUR. Like I said, I'll put links to both of those links to that expansive article, and I hope everybody in the Jamily enjoys this deep read. Down in the description area of this episode, as JamiroFan Talks About, down below. And be sure to check that out in your own time. And there are more Jamiditorials to release or to come, so keep your eyes on my social media for further details on the next topics that I'll be grasping or taking care of in my writings on my Jamiditorial series on my social media. So let's move on to the second half of this episode of JamiroFan Talks About. The first of the three new albums that come out in the early part of June of 2025 that I decided to do some little mini reviews of, and I think everybody in the online Jamily should check out in their own time, is first off from a amazing R&B soul artist who has been making lots of waves on a lot of my playlists on Spotify, and of course on all my constant music listening. Of course, I'm talking about Kyle Dion, who I've been talking about for a couple of years now here on my channel, but he just recently put out his second, or could be considered his third, full-length studio album called SOULAR, which is spelled S-O-U-L-A-R, play on the word soul. But yet, this is a continuation of Kyle Dion just continuing to expand his sound. And like I said, I kind of consider his sound in R&B and soul a mixture of 1980s pop music, DeBarge or Chico DeBarge, mixed with a bit of the Bruno Mars soul R&B funk experimentation he did between his solo album 24 Karat Magic and, of course, his amazing collaboration album of a group called Silk Sonic with, of course, other pop musical luminary Anderson .Paak and his group, the Free Nationals. This album is absolutely smack-packed full of new hot jams, slow jams, funk, and all kinds of great urban music mixtures. But as for my favorite tracks on this album, it is a very expansive album. But as for if I had to pick my favorite tracks from this album, I have to go with songs like "Sugar on the Rim," "Look Like That," "Tears on a Pretty Face," "Astro Afterglow," and "If I Knew." It is an absolutely immaculate album, and I highly recommend everybody in the online family to go and check out Kyle Dion's new album, Solar, and it's now available on all major streaming platforms. Now, the next album to come out in early June of 2025, which is going to be making some major musical waves, at least in my major ever-changing musical opinion, is from a band that was one of the most prominent bands of the early Brit pop or Brit rock movement of the early 90s, which of course was spearheaded mostly by the British tabloid media, but spearheaded by bands like Oasis and Blur, which ironically both bands had recently had resurgences in making brand new music. The moreover, the resurgence of Oasis for their 20th anniversary major worldwide tour, but I digress. I'm talking about the band from Sheffield, of course, called Pulp. Now, Pulp is a band who has been one of my constant favorites out of that whole musical scene of that early 90s period, with amazing albums like Different Class, His and Hers, Separations. I have loved Pulp, and the lead singer of that band, of course, one of the best songwriters of his generation, Jarvis Cocker, well, he ended up going off into a bit of a solo career after Pulp kind of called it a day in the early 2000s with their last album, We Love Life, and did two amazing solo albums in that time called Simply Jarvis and, of course, Future Complications. Well, Pulp finally have got back together to record a brand new album and have just released it here in early June called More, and it is an absolutely exceptional return of form and return to a bit of the grimy, sultry, sexy side of Pulp's music, which made them a trademark of that whole amazing Britpop, British rock scene, well, pretty much an early prerequisite of the American alternative rock scene for their time. But, oh man, More is an incredible album by Pulp, and it definitely sees Jarvis Cocker pick up from where he left off back in the early 90s of that great sultry alternative rock scene sound that many Pulp fans have come to know. But as for my favorite songs from this album, like I said, this whole album is banger and after banger after banger, but my favorite songs would be songs like Spike Island, Tina, Grown Ups, Farmer's Market, and Got to Have Love, and of course Background Noise. But I highly recommend everybody in the online family to check out this new album from the band Pulp, their first album in nearly 24 years of their musical history, withstanding the solo material that was done by Jarvis Cocker. But I highly recommend you check out this album in your own time, and if you get a chance to go back and deep dive some of their albums of the past 25 to 26 years, Pulp is one of the greatest British rock bands of their time. And lastly, for this trio of brand new albums that the Family ought to be checking out here in June of 2025 is, of course, an album I've been talking about a bit ad nauseum here on the JamiroFan 2000 YouTube channel and many videos. The second solo album from Jamiroquai's own Matt Johnson, who in his own right has turned into one of the most impressive musicians within and without of Jamiroquai for such a long time. His first solo album, of course, came out back in 2020 of With the Music, and we just got a little glimpse of the musical brilliance and compositional brilliance that Matt Johnson had behold. And now he's just released here in June 2025 his second solo album called simply called Warrior Princess, and it's an absolutely immaculate album. And I will dare say this album alone, and all of his other solo music that he's produced. I've said in the past that when Matt Johnson came in, unfortunately, to take over a bit of the compositional keyboard mantle from the late Toby Smith of Jamiroquai, who unfortunately passed away back in the early part of the Automaton era from, unfortunately, complications from cancer. I gave Matt Johnson one of the biggest compliments, saying I think he was a worthy heir to that amazing compositional and musical mantle along with JK in the band Jamiroquai, and this just solidifies that compliment. This is an amazing second round of funk, soul, and many great collaborational appearances in this album by the Triple H Horns and Jeff Lorber, and of course guitar stalwart in the American Wolfpack band of Corey Wong. And this album, top to bottom, is one of the best pieces of album work any band member of Jamiroquai has been able to put out. And this is no denigration to the stuff that Rob Harris is doing with Dune People, or Shola Akimbala and his amazing Afrobeat Realized solo album that recently came out in its finality. Of course, I'm talking about How Should I. This is a marvelous, marvelous solo album. As for tracks, I it's just every track is individually amazing in its composition and its musical exploration. But for my favorite songs on the album, I'm going to go with Old School Funk, Is It Too Late, Fascination, Earth's Mysteries, Flowers in Their Hair. This is an immaculate album, and massive congratulations to Matt Johnson on producing yet another amazing album. And I consider this an appetizer for the upcoming ninth Jamiroquai album era, which will hopefully be coming out sometime in late 2025. For the time being, listen to this and Shola's albums. They are both amazing, amazing visions of music outside of Jamiroquai that should be fully realized in a lot of listening in your free time. And that is it for this episode of JamiroFan Talks About. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And be sure to check out all of the 3 albums I mentioned, and of course my new Jamiditorial release that I've released on my social media, with links, dream links to all 3 albums and to my Jamiditorial, either on IMGUR or on my Instagram individually by page, down in the description area. This episode of JamiroFan Talks About down below. Be sure to check out all that great goodness in your own time. And as always, this is JamiroFan 2000. Thank you again for watching this episode of JamiroFan Talks About. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe and ding the bell on your YouTube to stay up to date on all the newest content coming to the JamiroFan 2000 YouTube channel as we venture into the early summer of 2025. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of exciting times coming and a lot of more updates to come from the band members of Jamiroquai on their individual solo projects. And of course, from the highly anticipated 9th Jamiroquai album era, which will hopefully be happening sometime in the fall winter of 2025. But as always, this is JamiroFan 2000. I'll fully endeavor to keep bringing you all the latest news, and I'll see you again really soon with more Jamiroquai content here on the JamiroFan 2000 YouTube channel. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care. Thank you again all for the support, and I'll see you around.